It was a quiet evening in Lancaster, California, a city tucked away in the sprawling vastness of Los Angeles County. The kind of night where the hum of streetlights and the occasional passing car paint a picture of calm, even solitude. But for Jennifer Floyd, a 19-year-old with her whole life ahead of her, this evening would mark the start of a nightmare that no one could have anticipated. Jennifer was just walking. Alone. Maybe she was lost in her own thoughts, maybe she was simply trying to get home. What she didn't know was that someone was watching her. Someone who, by every standard, should have been the one to ensure her safety. Benny Vincente Caluya. 50 years old. A veteran deputy sheriff with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. A man who had sworn to serve and protect. But that night, Benny Vincente Caluya wasn't acting as a protector. He was something else entirely. As Jennifer walked, Caluya approached her. A figure of authority in his uniform, his badge glinting under the dim glow of streetlights. There was no reason for Jennifer to suspect what was about to happen. She trusted him, how could she not? He wasn't a stranger. He was a deputy sheriff, someone society taught her to respect, to obey. But within moments that trust was shattered. Jennifer was taken. Against her will. By someone she believed she could count on. Taken to a place where her safety was no longer guaranteed. A place where the lines between right and wrong had been erased. What unfolded next was almost too horrific to comprehend. Methamphetamine. Coercion. An assault so calculated, so vile, that it would leave scars far deeper than anyone could see. And the man responsible? The very person who was supposed to uphold justice, to represent the law. Tonight we're telling the story of Benny Vincente Caluya, a trusted lawman accused of preying on the vulnerable. A story of betrayal, abuse of power, and the chilling reality that sometimes those meant to protect us can be the ones we fear most. How did this happen? How could a man with decades of experience in law enforcement commit such an atrocity? And perhaps most haunting of all, were there others? If you're here for stories that not only seek the truth but demand accountability, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Because the story we're about to uncover isn't just about one crime. It's about a breach of trust so profound it forces us to ask, who can we really trust when those entrusted with power turn it into a weapon? Jennifer Floyd was just 19. She lived in Lancaster, California, a place that seemed, on the surface, like an ordinary suburban city. Jennifer wasn't extraordinary in the way the world often demands for attention, but she was extraordinary to the people who knew her. She was a daughter, a sister, and a friend. She had dreams, though what they were exactly, no one would ever hear in her own words again without the weight of tragedy behind them. Jennifer was navigating her young adult life. Like so many others at her age, she was facing challenges that shaped her. Some say she was in a transitional phase, trying to find her footing and figure out where she fit in the world. Her family described her as sweet, a little shy but determined. She had her struggles like anyone else. Maybe it was financial pressure, maybe it was the pressures of growing up too quickly. But Jennifer had always been resilient, even in moments where resilience wasn't easy to find. On August 28, 2023, Jennifer was alone. It's not unusual for a 19-year-old to walk alone at night, especially in a familiar area. Maybe she felt safe in Lancaster, or maybe she just had no other choice. But her solitude made her vulnerable. Vulnerable to someone who recognized that vulnerability. Someone who didn't see her as a person, but as an opportunity. What happened to Jennifer Floyd that night was horrific. But to understand her story fully, we have to turn our attention to the man who destroyed her trust. A man whose duty was to protect and serve but who, instead, preyed on her. Benny Vincente Caluya. Benny Vincente Caluya. 50 years old. A veteran deputy sheriff with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. By all outward appearances, he was the kind of person the community was supposed to look up to. He wore the badge that symbolized authority, trust, and justice. For decades, Caluya served in a department responsible for keeping one of the largest counties in the United States safe. He had the training, the experience, and the public's respect. But underneath that uniform there was something else. Something far darker. Caluya had built a career that gave him access to power and, perhaps more importantly, the perception of legitimacy. If he pulled you over, you wouldn't question it. If he approached you on the street, you would assume he had a reason. That power, that unquestioned authority, became the tool he would eventually use to commit unthinkable crimes. But were there signs? Were there moments in his career when someone might have noticed that Caluya wasn't the man he seemed to be? Some former colleagues have whispered about questionable behavior, moments that seemed off. Nothing that ever made it to an official report, nothing that ever raised red flags high enough to warrant an investigation. And then there's the psychology of it all. The quiet, almost invisible arrogance that comes with wearing a badge for too long. Did Caluya begin to believe he was untouchable? That the rules didn't apply to him? Was he always a predator, or did decades of unchecked authority make him one? These are questions that may never have clear answers. But what we do know is this. By the time August 28 rolled around, Benny Vincente Caluya was a man who believed he could take what he wanted, when he wanted, without consequence. And Jennifer Floyd became his target? Lancaster, California. A city of roughly 170,000 people, nestled in the Antelope Valley of Los Angeles County. It's a place where suburban life meets the harsh beauty of the desert. The streets are lined with chain stores, schools, and family homes. But Lancaster, like any city, has its shadows. Its darker corners where desperation and opportunity often intersect. Crime isn't unheard of in Lancaster. While it's not the most dangerous city in California, it's also not immune to the struggles of urban life, poverty, addiction, and violence. The community, like so many others, trusts its law enforcement to be the line of defense against those struggles. Deputies like Benny Vincente Caluya are, or were, seen as protectors, the ones who keep the shadows at bay. On the night of August 28, 2023, the streets of Lancaster were quiet. The kind of quiet that can lull you into a false sense of security. Jennifer Floyd was walking alone. Maybe she was on her way home, or maybe she was heading to meet someone. We don't know for sure. What we do know is that she crossed paths with Benny Vincente Caluya. Caluya wasn't just driving by. He wasn't just a deputy sheriff patrolling the area. He saw Jennifer. He stopped. And in that moment, everything changed. The dim glow of streetlights casting long shadows, the cool desert air thick with silence. Jennifer might have felt a flicker of unease, but how could she have known what was about to happen? How could she have guessed that the man stepping out of the patrol car wasn't there to help her, but to take her? This is where the line between protector and predator was erased. This is where the story of Jennifer Floyd and Benny Vincente Caluya truly begins. August 28, 2023. The streets of Lancaster were quiet that night. For Jennifer Floyd, it was just another evening, another moment of routine that would tragically and abruptly change the course of her life. As she walked alone, unaware of the eyes that were fixed on her, a patrol car slowed to a stop nearby. Inside was Benny Vincente Caluya, a veteran deputy sheriff with decades of experience. This wasn't the first time he had approached someone on the street, but tonight was different. Tonight, Caluya wasn't acting as a law enforcement officer. He wasn't responding to a call or investigating a crime. Tonight, his badge was a shield for something far darker. As he stepped out of his patrol car, Jennifer likely saw his uniform first. The authority it commanded, the trust it demanded. Maybe she thought he was there to help. Maybe he asked if she needed a ride or if she was lost. What we know for certain is that this interaction wasn't random. Caluya wasn't just passing by, he was targeting her. The details of their initial exchange remain unclear, but what followed is painfully evident. Jennifer was coerced, persuaded, or perhaps forced into his vehicle. At that moment, her autonomy was taken from her. What should have been an encounter with someone sworn to serve and protect became the start of a nightmare she could never have anticipated. From the streets of Lancaster, Benny Vincente Caluya drove Jennifer not to the safety of her home or the precinct, but to his own house. A place that should have represented normalcy, security, even privacy. But for Jennifer, it became a prison. A place where trust was shattered and the unimaginable unfolded. When Jennifer arrived at Caluya's Lancaster home, she was no longer just a young woman walking alone. She was now in the hands of someone who had already violated her trust in ways that cannot be undone. The reports paint a chilling picture. Methamphetamine. A drug known for its devastating effects on the mind and body. Caluya allegedly introduced Jennifer to the substance, not as an accident or coincidence, but as a calculated act. It wasn't enough for him to take her physically, he sought to take her mentally too. It's hard to comprehend the reasoning behind such an act. Was it about control? Was it an attempt to weaken her defenses, to make her compliance easier? Whatever his reasoning, the result was the same. Jennifer, already vulnerable and frightened, was now under the influence of a substance that blurred reality and left her even more powerless. And then the assault. The exact details of what happened inside Caluya's home are not something we'll linger on. They've been outlined in court documents, they've been discussed in hushed tones, but the pain and violation Jennifer endured are not things that words can truly capture. What we do know is this: Jennifer was molested by a man she had every reason to trust. A man whose very career was built on the promise of protecting people like her. 4 hours, or maybe longer, Jennifer remained in that house. Alone with a man who had complete control over her. Her body, her mind, her sense of safety, all of it was stripped away. And when it was over, when Benny Vincente Caluya had finished what he set out to do, Jennifer was left with scars that would never fully heal. This isn't just a story about a crime. It's a story about betrayal. About the abuse of power in its most personal and devastating form. Benny Vincente Caluya wasn't just any man. He was a deputy sheriff. A symbol of authority, of law, of protection. When he drove through the streets of Lancaster, people didn't look at him with suspicion. They looked at him with trust. Jennifer Floyd likely looked at him the same way. She had no reason to believe that the man in uniform was anything other than what his badge represented. But that night, Caluya exploited everything his position stood for. He used his authority to lure Jennifer into his car. He used his badge to mask his intentions. And when he brought her to his home, he stripped away the very trust his career was built on. Crimes like this don't just hurt the victim, they ripple outward. They shake the community's faith in law enforcement. They make people question whether they can trust the men and women sworn to protect them. If a deputy sheriff can commit such an atrocity, what does that mean for the institution he represents? Jennifer Floyd's story is a stark reminder of the power imbalance that exists between law enforcement and the public. It's a reminder that the badge, while a symbol of authority, is not a guarantee of morality. And it's a call to action, for accountability, for reform, and for justice. This crime stands out not just because of its brutality, but because of who committed it, because of what it represents, and because of the questions it forces us to ask. What happens when those we trust most become the ones we fear most? How does a community recover when the line between protector and predator is crossed so violently? And, most importantly, how do we ensure that this never happens again? Every crime eventually comes to light, no matter how carefully hidden. In this case, the harrowing truth began to unravel when Jennifer Floyd found the courage to speak out. Following the events at Benny Vincente Caluya's home, Jennifer sought help. Whether it was through a trusted confidant, a family member, or a direct report to authorities, her decision to come forward was the first critical step in exposing this horrific crime. Jennifer's account, though likely fragmented by fear and the effects of the methamphetamine she was given, painted a chilling picture. She described the abduction, the drugging, and the assault in vivid, painful detail. Her statements became the foundation of the investigation, a roadmap for law enforcement to follow. Medical reports further corroborated her story. A hospital examination revealed traces of methamphetamine in her system, evidence that matched her claim of being drugged. Physical examinations provided additional proof of the assault, creating a damning picture of what had transpired. But beyond the physical evidence, there was Jennifer herself. A 19-year-old who had been through an experience no one should ever endure. Her courage in recounting the details was matched only by her determination to seek justice, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. Investigating any crime is a complex task. Investigating one of your own, however, introduces layers of complication that go beyond the usual scope of police work. When the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department received the report implicating Benny Vincente Caluya, they were faced with an extraordinary challenge. Caluya wasn't just a random suspect. He was a decorated deputy sheriff, a colleague, someone many within the department knew personally. The department's leadership had to make a decision. Would they handle this case internally, risking accusations of bias and cover-ups? Or would they involve outside agencies to ensure transparency? To their credit, the sheriff's department acted swiftly. They opened an internal investigation, working alongside external oversight bodies to ensure the process was impartial. Caluya was immediately placed on administrative leave, a standard procedure, but one that underscored the gravity of the allegations. For the investigators assigned to the case, this was no ordinary assignment. Every piece of evidence, every statement, and every lead had to be scrutinized, not just for its relevance, but for its potential to withstand the intense public and legal scrutiny that was sure to follow. Investigating a fellow officer meant walking a tightrope between justice and the risk of eroding public trust in law enforcement as a whole. The investigation into Benny Vincente Caluya's actions was meticulous, methodical, and exhaustive. Forensic evidence was a cornerstone of the case. Investigators collected samples from Caluya's home, searching for any traces that could corroborate Jennifer's account. Fingerprints, DNA, and other physical evidence were carefully documented and analyzed. Jennifer's testimony provided a roadmap for investigators, but they needed more. Witness statements were crucial. Were there neighbors who saw or heard anything unusual that night? Did anyone notice Jennifer entering or leaving Caluya's home? Investigators left no stone unturned, interviewing anyone who might have information, no matter how seemingly insignificant. Technology also played a key role. Surveillance footage from nearby streets was reviewed to trace Caluya's patrol car on the night of August 28. Cell phone records were examined to determine his movements and communications. Investigators even looked into his work logs and duty assignments to see if there were discrepancies that could point to premeditation. The most damning piece of evidence, however, was Jennifer's account. Her story, supported by medical and forensic evidence, painted a picture that was difficult to refute. But for investigators, the goal wasn't just to prove that the crime occurred, it was to build an airtight case that could stand up in court. And that meant collecting every possible piece of evidence, no matter how small. When the news broke that a deputy sheriff had been accused of such a heinous crime, the reaction was swift and visceral. For the people of Lancaster, the story hit close to home. This wasn't a faceless criminal, it was someone they might have seen patrolling their streets, attending community events, or responding to emergencies. The betrayal of trust was palpable. Protests erupted in the community, with many demanding accountability not just for Caluya, but for the systems that allowed someone like him to wield power unchecked. The hashtag Justice for Jennifer began trending on social media, drawing attention to the case far beyond Lancaster. The media played a significant role in shaping the narrative. News outlets covered the story extensively, focusing not only on the crime but on the broader implications for law enforcement accountability. Some journalists questioned how someone with Caluya's alleged behavior could remain on the force for so long. Others highlighted the bravery of Jennifer Floyd in coming forward, framing her as a symbol of resilience and courage. But with media attention came challenges. Misinformation and speculation spread quickly, complicating the investigation and adding pressure on all involved. The sheriff's department faced criticism for their initial handling of the case, with some accusing them of trying to shield Caluya from justice. Amid the public outcry, one thing became clear: this wasn't just about one man or one crime. It was about a community grappling with a breach of trust, a system under scrutiny, and a young woman who refused to be silenced. The aftermath of this harrowing crime left a deep scar on Jennifer Floyd and the community of Lancaster. For Jennifer, the path to recovery has been anything but straightforward. After enduring the trauma of her abduction, drugging, and assault, she faced the additional burden of reliving those events during the investigation and trial. While her courage in testifying helped secure justice, the emotional and psychological toll was immense. Jennifer's recovery process has involved intensive therapy and support from victim advocacy groups. In public statements released through her legal team, she has described her journey as one of resilience and determination. She has also expressed gratitude for the overwhelming support she received from the community and strangers who rallied behind her with messages of encouragement. But Jennifer's life has been irrevocably altered. Trust, once a natural part of her interactions with others, now comes with caution and fear. Everyday activities, like walking alone or engaging with authority figures, are shadowed by the memories of that night. Still, her strength has inspired others, and she has become a symbol of resilience for survivors of similar crimes. The community of Lancaster was equally shaken. The betrayal by someone who was supposed to protect them left residents grappling with a mix of outrage, fear, and a demand for accountability. Protests and public forums were held, where citizens voiced their frustration and called for systemic changes to prevent such abuses from happening again. For many, the case highlighted a broader issue of vulnerability, not just of individuals like Jennifer but of entire communities who place their trust in systems and individuals that are supposed to safeguard them. The sense of betrayal was palpable, but it also galvanized a collective resolve to demand better from those in positions of authority. The conviction of Benny Vincente Caluya sent shockwaves through law enforcement agencies across the nation, particularly the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. In the wake of the case, the department faced intense scrutiny. Critics questioned how someone with Caluya's apparent tendencies could remain in a position of power for so long. Internal investigations revealed significant gaps in oversight and accountability, leading to calls for reform. To address public outcry, the department implemented several policy changes. These included more rigorous background checks for officers, mandatory psychological evaluations, and enhanced training programs focusing on ethics, integrity, and recognizing signs of abuse within the ranks. An independent oversight committee was also established to ensure transparency in future investigations involving law enforcement personnel. The department publicly pledged to rebuild trust with the community, but for many the damage had already been done. This case also sparked a national conversation about the accountability of law enforcement. Advocates for police reform argued that Caluya's actions were not an isolated incident but a symptom of systemic failures that shielded officers from scrutiny. They called for greater oversight, stronger whistleblower protections, and an end to the blue wall of silence that often protects officers accused of wrongdoing. While the reforms were a step in the right direction, they also raised questions about whether they would be enough to prevent similar crimes in the future. The case became a rallying point for those demanding structural changes in policing, with many seeing it as an opportunity to push for lasting reform. Despite the trial and conviction, the case left several lingering questions that have continued to haunt those who followed the story. One of the most pressing questions is whether Caluya had committed similar crimes in the past. During the investigation, there were whispers of other women coming forward with stories of suspicious encounters with him. However, none of these allegations were substantiated enough to be included in the trial. This has led to theories that Jennifer's case may not have been an isolated incident. Advocates have called for a thorough review of Caluya's career, including any complaints or incidents that may have been overlooked or dismissed. Some wonder if a culture of complacency or fear within the department allowed him to operate unchecked for so long. Another unanswered question is what motivated Caluya to commit such a heinous crime. While the trial focused on the facts of the case, it left little room to explore the psychological factors that drove his actions. Was he emboldened by his position of authority? Did he believe he was untouchable? Or was this a culmination of deeper, long-standing issues that went unnoticed or unaddressed? Theories about systemic failures have also been a focal point of discussion. Some argue that the case is emblematic of a broader issue within law enforcement, a lack of accountability and a culture that prioritizes protecting its own over seeking justice. They point to the initial hesitance of some officials to investigate Caluya as evidence of this systemic problem. For Jennifer and the community of Lancaster, these lingering questions are a reminder that justice, while served in the courtroom, is not always enough to heal the wounds left behind. The case has become a symbol of the need for vigilance, accountability, and reform, not just within law enforcement but in society as a whole. As the dust settles, one thing remains clear: this case will not be forgotten. It has left an indelible mark on everyone it touched, from Jennifer Floyd and her family to the residents of Lancaster and beyond. It stands as a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of holding those in authority accountable for their actions. Next, we'll reflect on the broader implications of this case and the lessons it offers for society. Stay with us as we conclude this journey. As we bring this case to a close, it's essential to step back and reflect on what this story reveals about power, trust, and accountability. The actions of Benny Vincente Caluya are a sobering reminder of the importance of holding those in positions of authority to the highest ethical standards. When someone entrusted with the responsibility of protecting the public instead uses their power to exploit and harm, it shakes the very foundation of trust that society depends on. This case has forced us to confront uncomfortable questions about how systems meant to safeguard the vulnerable can sometimes enable their victimization. Jennifer Floyd's courage in coming forward, despite the fear and trauma she endured, is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Her bravery not only ensured justice in her own case but also sparked critical conversations about accountability within law enforcement. Jennifer's willingness to share her story, no matter how painful, has undoubtedly empowered others who may feel voiceless in the face of similar experiences. This case has also illuminated the cracks in the structures meant to oversee law enforcement. It underscores the need for rigorous checks and balances, independent oversight, and a commitment to transparency. It reminds us that the pursuit of justice is not just about punishing wrongdoers but about creating systems that prevent such abuses from happening in the first place. But the lessons of this case don't end here. They extend to each of us. How do we, as a society, ensure that those in positions of power are held to the highest standards of conduct? What measures can be taken to identify and address warning signs before they lead to tragedy? And perhaps the most difficult question of all, how do we rebuild trust in institutions when that trust has been so profoundly broken? These are not questions with easy answers, but they are questions worth asking. They challenge us to examine our systems, demand accountability, and advocate for the kind of changes that ensure justice is not just a concept but a reality for everyone. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think can be done to prevent cases like this from happening again? Do you believe the reforms implemented after this case will be enough to restore trust? Let us know in the comments below. As we conclude, I want to thank you for joining us on this in-depth exploration of a case that shook the very fabric of trust and accountability. These stories are not easy to tell, but they are necessary. They remind us of the fragility of the systems we rely on and the strength of those who fight for justice. If you found this case compelling, please take a moment to like this video, share it with others who might find it thought-provoking, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that uncover the truth, no matter how difficult it may be. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.